Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you for everyone for being here. I'm excited about this conference. I was mentioning just as people were coming in that I'm up here in Canada and it is a snow day and it has snowed for the first time and my 3-year-old is super excited for it. And I told him, Dad, he wants to go out and I'm like, Daddy really cannot go out right now and play in the snow. So that's what I'm at up here in Canada. So I wanted to get a bit of an overview of a very strange journey that I've been on in the video space for the last about 3 years. And a journey that I think actually offers a little bit of perspective onto what it is that students might be interested in, and that I have found that I have a bunch of takeaways that I've used for my own actual classes. So where I began on this journey was 3 years ago. I was forced to teach an online course for the first time. And the goal of this online course was for IT students learning discrete math that were away on their co-op terms. So it had to be asynchronous and it had to be online. That was the purpose of it. And we really had no idea what we were doing, but we were trying to read literature and figure out what we could do best. And so what was the main part of this from the teacher's perspective was creating active learning video modules, which might sound like a tension and a contradiction right in the name of it, but combinations of video modules and active learning. But what I did was I threw them up on YouTube because that was just like, where do you host videos? And so I put them up on YouTube, which is one of many options. I don't actually recommend it these days for some reasons, but nevertheless, it's where I put it. And then, so where did I end up? Well, I guess I've now inadvertently become something of a YouTuber or an edu-tuber, as something put it. So this is what my sort of YouTube channel looks like. It's sort of a weird middle ground size. So I have 87,000 subscribers. To give a sense of how big that is, yes, I have gone traveling and being stopped at like random coffee shops and being like, you're the guy from YouTube, I want to take a selfie. But it's small enough that happened once. So it's sort of in the middle ground. And also middle ground in the sense of YouTube. So there's, in the math YouTuber space, the largest ones are about 3 million people. And then there's, of course, many, many instructors who have put up their videos and maybe have a few subscribers, but I'm sort of in the middle. To give a little bit of a context of it, I've now taught 6 courses that I've put up. But I pretty much just put up the videos I'm doing. I've done 3 fully online and 3 that were flipped classrooms. So that means that the videos were there to support active learning in classrooms. And the stat I always like for how big this is that in every 24-hour period that goes by, there's 1,000 hours of videos watched, which is just like this mind-blowingly large number. Now, I want to put this out here from the perspective of what is it that we can learn as instructors for our classroom? Like, what can we take back about this? Because my suggestion is not everyone should go and try to be a math YouTuber. I'm not even sure if I really want to be this, but here we are. So what have I learned? Now, the first thing is just to note a little bit about YouTube. So YouTube does in general tilt to be relatively young, and this is my own statistics, and so that just demonstrates my content as well is for university students and who are in STEM fields, so it makes sense that it's going to be young. But it's also worth noting the gender disparity here. So more than 3/4 of people on YouTube are men, and so that does indicate that there's some questions about how do we engage women in mathematics, and maybe YouTube is not always the best way, or think of different strategies within YouTube. Secondly, it's worth noting that this really is a very global audience. So about 1/4 of my audience is American, but then 16% is Indian. And in fact, if you were to expand the CMORE, you'd see that it's something like 200 different countries have actual people who have watched the video. So it's truly a global scale, and it really sort of goes down, starts with English speaking and ends up with a lot of people who are using subtitles as well, which is really interesting. Okay, so I want to, this is very in the weeds, but I want to unpack before we go to lessons a little bit about what YouTube cares about, because there's a tension between you make videos that are optimized for your students and for their learning and for the learning objectives you have, and then optimized for the YouTube algorithm, which is a different thing. So what does the YouTube algorithm care about, which in some sense is a reflection of what YouTube thinks people care about, what they think that students are going to care about. So we shouldn't completely not care about what the YouTube algorithm cares about, if that makes sense. So it cares about 2 things. The first is called AVD, or average view duration. And basically it says if someone starts watching your video, how long do they watch the video for? By the way, it's a very small number. I'll show it later, but my best video that is promoted by the YouTube algorithm most has a watch time of like 2 minutes and 57 seconds, an average watch time. It's a very, very small number. Over all of my videos, I think maybe the highest is maybe 4 minutes, something like this. So short, that's one thing. But you want them to watch as long as possible. And we're going to break this down in a bit. But to me, the main things are going to be, is it engaging? So do students feel like they want to keep on watching because of the engagement? And then second of all, this happens on YouTube more than in classes, is it useful? Because on YouTube, if it's not answering the problem that someone searched for, they will click away. In your class, maybe they'll watch it even if they don't think it's useful, because there's going to be a test on it. So the usefulness is a little bit there, but engaging is very important. So the other metric that YouTube algorithm is based on is called click-through rate. And this seems weird, but it actually is important for us instructors. Click-through rate means if YouTube presents your video among many other videos, do they click on your one? And they don't have very much information here. They have the title of your video and they have the image of your video. And technically the number of views it has and the length of it. Those are the 4 pieces of information someone could check. So one of the things to be a good YouTuber, and this is not just for math education, it's for anyone who's a big YouTuber in the YouTube space, is they spend so much time making engaging videos, or no, sorry, making engaging thumbnails and engaging titles. And it's all about presenting the content in a way that actually excites. And I think there is a lesson there for us. It's a way that you want to signpost that what you're going to do is actually interesting. And so I spend a lot of time and I actually try to think, okay, I've done something really, really boring here. I'm doing separable differential equations. How could I phrase this question in a way that makes it sound interesting, that people would want to click on it? All right. And then the final thing before I sort of switch away to takeaways is, what do my videos actually look like? And I actually have a few different styles here that perhaps may be an inspiration of some form. One style on the left here is what I'll call a Khan Academy style video. It's just me writing on my tablet. On the right, I advance a PowerPoint presentation, which is what I'm doing right now. And that allows me to quickly go through a bunch of different content and to involve a lot of computer graphics and MATLAB, which I like to do. And then the third is just talking to the camera. Okay, so I have these 3 different styles. Why might I choose one style or the other? So the first thing is called the personalization principle. And there's a lot of data about this, which is that including your face, having an instructor presence in an online course is actually really, really important. It helps increase the engagement with the content. So I don't think you need to use the fancy green screens I was using before, but I do think a little webcam in the corner, if you're comfortable with it, there is evidence to suggest that this helps a little bit. As does having sort of an enthusiastic and conversational tone, as opposed to being very sort of formal. These also have some indication that they are successful. This is a lot of studies of MOOCs and so forth. But that's been my experience as well on YouTube, that when I switched to putting myself sort of front and center, it increased the engagement, it increased the watch time, which helped the YouTube algorithm. But for our purposes as instructors, I think that instructor presence really makes a big difference. And I'd always encourage you to do that in an online course. You might wonder then, well, why would I choose one or the other of these methods? And largely it has to do with the pacing of the content. So if I'm deep into computation, that's challenging, there's a lot of cognitive load on the students, I'll usually use the left method, because then I am writing a little bit slower. I'm going at the same pace of what the students are writing. So it depends on what that pacing is going to be. And for some learning objectives, it's appropriate to do that. The PowerPoint advancing one often happens a little bit faster. I can include more graphics, I can include more animations. And so I really like the PowerPoint style one anytime where the learning objective is a bit more geometric, a little bit more conceptual, where I want students to get the big idea, but we're not being bogged down in the details of a lot of different calculations. And then thirdly, the one which is just me, I use this often as just part of the video. And this is when I want to engage the students and try to have like kind of a little bit more of like a discussion. We're going to talk big picture about something, like what's the big idea here, but we're not even bogged down in formulas at all. And so that's how I choose which of these. I try to choose the methodology that's optimized to the type of learning objective that I have at that particular moment. Okay, so what have I learned that I've taken away into my courses? Well, the number one thing, if there is, it sounds silly and it sounds non-technical, but it's about storytelling. If you can make your short videos or segments of classes have narrative arcs, have story to them, I think this is the single best way to make something engaging. And mathematics has so many wonderful stories, so many things that might superficially seem dry and boring and unengaging, in truth, really can be rephrased in a way that makes them engaging. And so as an example, have you ever thought that a student might perceive math to be like, there's this fact, and then that fact, and then that other fact, and then other fact, and then fundamental theorem of calculus, which is just another fact, and then another fact, you know what I mean? Well, a very simple thing that you can do to adjust this is to replace the ands with buts and therefores. This one thing happened. But then this surprising thing happened and created a tension that we had to finally resolve, and therefore we got to the fact 3. That's how you can phrase things as a story. You're not changing the content that you have to teach. Sometimes you can even rephrase it. You're like, I have a hook, and then there's tension, and then there's a resolution. One of the things I found with that average view duration is if you don't have a hook in the first 30 seconds of your video, it sounds so almost petty, but it's true. You don't have a hook in the first 30 seconds that's like, why should you be interested in this topic? Why would you want to watch this topic? Then it's very likely that people will just sort of click away and they will leave, and then the YouTube algorithm won't like you, and then you'll do poorly. But from the perspective of our students, it's the same thing, right? Yeah, they're not going to click away. They're in our classes, if it's physical or if it's, they're probably going to watch to the end of the video mostly, but they will stop being as engaged. And so having that hook that brings them into the story, I think, is really important. The second thing I found is what I'll call the multimedia principle. Well, I'm quoting the classification here from Meyer when I call it the multimedia principle. And the idea is basically this: show, don't tell, or at least show and tell. So, for example, you could stand up and say, I want to talk about what a rectangle is, and you could say the word rectangle, or you could just show the rectangle. Now, I'm being a little bit silly here with the trivial example, but more realistically, I like to have a lot of animations and graphics and other sort of information that allows students to visualize what's going on. So this is the TNB frame that can be described for curves. It's part of multivariable calculus. It doesn't matter so much. But the point is, having a graphic is so much better at being able to describe stuff. But I've always found that when I'm sitting on a chalkboard, it takes a long time. There's a friction. There's a restriction to drawing wonderful graphics and animations. But you can take your time and put these into videos. And so I often will try to do this as much as possible. So I would always encourage you could show something. If there's any point where you're thinking, I'm saying something, but if I put a visual image, it will help people's memory about it. So if I'm doing a video about fluid flow, for example, I might just find a little bit of free footage of fluid flowing and just drop it in for 5 seconds. It's sort of a pattern interrupt. Instead of just being the talking head talking, you get this big, beautiful image of this fluid flow for just 5 seconds. And now somebody is anchoring their thoughts in this. And so that's the multimedia principle. The next thing to mention is it is really important to keep things short. And I think this is true even for a long classroom. So there's a big study of MOOCs. These are the massive open online courses. And so people are trying to do it. And what they found is that the average percent viewed is mostly, as in, 100% of people were getting to, I think it was yeah, I can't remember exactly how their statistic worked, but regardless, it was such that in the 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 minute categories, the average number of people was going and hitting most of the video, and that was good. But as soon as you started increasing its length, it drops down precipitously. And I found the same thing with my videos. So I found that if you double the length of a video, you might add a minute of watch time. Something like that. Like if you go from 5 minutes to 10 minutes or 10 minutes to 15 minutes, you don't add much watch time. People click away. And on YouTube, they're more finicky than on your classes. But I think that even in your physical classes, they stop paying attention. Here's an example of the video. This image is just from a while ago. It keeps on going. But this video is one of my best. 5 minutes and 30 seconds long, average view duration, 255. And that is one of my best, at 50%. Most will be down in the 30% and 40% categories. So it's worth thinking about. And when I teach a physical course, I think, well, after 10 or 15 minutes, I really want to do some sort of active learning activity to get people going. In asynchronous courses that I teach, I try to have videos 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes perhaps at the maximum, and then an activity for students to be doing, something like this. The fake skeuomorphic chalkboard background is just an image of the background of my PowerPoints, and I love it. Just gives that allure of being in the classroom. Okay, so I actually want to ask you now. So I've talked about videos and YouTube, and I think it has some strengths. Certainly, engagement with this global audience. Can someone say, from a pedagogical perspective, what is the biggest single problem pedagogically with it? Ads is true. I have an unmonetized channel and a monetized channel. The unmonetized channel, where there are no ads, is the only one that is showing to any students or included, but that's one of the things. You definitely don't want to have ads on it. But pedagogically, why might, or what's just bad with having a bunch of YouTube videos? It is distracting, that is true. Yeah, no feedback, that's definitely one. That might be equal to the one I'm thinking about. I sort of can organize it with playlists, and beside, I do the organization in my learning management system anyways. Not interactive is very true. And in fact, this is the one that I had a comment, this came from 2 days ago. This is a student says, literally watched every video in a day and feeling extremely confident about multivariable calculus. Too many comments. Yeah, no student-student interaction. Those are all true. This student made a mistake, did he not? I mean, you shouldn't go and watch 50 videos of multivariable calculus in a day. There's no active learning here. That's what I'm trying to get at. There's no interaction. There's no student-student interaction. There's no student-instructor interaction. There's no student working on problems interaction. I mean, I put prompts in my videos like a pause and ponder moment, which I stole from 3 Blue, 1 Brown. But there really is this issue where there's no active learning. So the biggest thing I want to encourage you, as much as I love YouTube, is that in my classes, it goes video, active learning opportunity, video, active learning opportunity, with places where students can interact with themselves, where students can interact with me as well. So video is great, but it is an incredibly passive, one-directional, instructor-focused thing. And I think you should use it and you should lean into it. And I'm glad that my videos are out there and able to be used worldwide, but I want that active learning component. Final thing that I will talk about is the idea of cognitive load. This is the amount of sort of mental stress that's going on. Cognitive load is typically divided into 3 categories, one of which is intrinsic load. This is the part you can't change. There's just some intrinsic complexity to the concept that you're talking about. Second of all is extrinsic load, which is the amount of extra load that you put on by the way that you are presenting it. And thirdly, germane load, which is the load that it takes to make long-term mental schemas that understand what's going on. So generally we want to increase the long-term memory formation and understanding and sense-making and germane load, and we want to decrease the amount of extrinsic load. So you might have already noticed it a little bit, but I work very, very hard when I'm making my videos to minimize the extrinsic load. This is things like color coding, highlighting the specific equation that you're referring to. I have to have a highlight box that moves around the screen, kind of like my highlighter. So you know I'm talking about extrinsic load because you see it as well. This is me reducing your extrinsic load as I highlight on it right now. It's things like adjusting the pacing. So when the load gets a little bit too high, then you go down in your speed, that type of thing. It includes that multimedia principle where you're including graphics so that there's a visual and an audio as you go along and connect with the different ideas. So anything you can do to reduce the load that comes from the way you're teaching it. And in videos, perhaps more than on a chalkboard, you really can cut down that extrinsic load. And then it's in the active learning that you build up your germane load. All right, and so with that, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and I'd love to just chat for the next few minutes. I'd love to hear all your questions that you have about my strange journey.
All right, thank you. I think we have maybe a couple of minutes for maybe 1 or 2 quick questions if anyone has them.
So I would like to ask a question. In the classroom, if you're using your videos for the classroom and as a tool to keep engaged your student, would you use summative assessment or formative assessment? What will you think it will fit better what you're doing?
Well, thank you, Alvaro. I think you will generally want to use both. I am definitely a large fan of formative assessment. So part of the activities that one has to do after any video is what I've typically referred to as a checkpoint quiz. It's just a very simple feedback to the students and to ourselves, which says, did you understand the idea of the video before they've worked in tutorials and worked on homeworks and gone to test the larger summative assessments? So I think you're completely right. I think having a formative assessment is a very important part and really helps that sort of that active learning part. Yeah, thank you.
I have a few quick comments. I hope you don't mind me jumping in, Trevor. Thank you so much. I actually came across one of your videos last night, and I was a little shocked to see the same face today, so I appreciate it. A couple of comments. One of the things that I do on my channel is that I actually make playlists. I'm not a big fan of what I call reinventing the wheel, right? I really don't think that every instructor needs to be out there making YouTube videos when they already exist. So videos like yourself and other great channels, I can put into a curated list. And part of what I tell my students is that not only do I create my own calculus videos, because 5 years ago I was motivated to do that, but I'm your curator is what I tell them. I don't think you should be clicking on random stuff in YouTube. I'm going to tell you what's important for our class.
That's
and
great.
The other thing that I wanted to mention was the assessment part of it. I've gotten a little bit of pushback with doing these kind of quizzes. Okay, there's a couple of problems with quizzes. Like, number one, the students don't really like being quizzed on a video because they'll say something like, but you haven't taught it to me yet. And I'm like, but I taught it to you in the video. But I think their perception of what a video is a little bit different. And so anyways, what I have started to do with my videos in my classes is, and sorry, I'm rambling on here, is that I'm making a worksheet corresponding to each video that forces the student to take notes while they're watching the video. So for example, for my Calculus 1 channel, for my Calculus 1 playlist, which is all my videos, I actually have a worksheet that the student fills out as they watch the video. It's like fill in the blank. It's, multiple choice and stuff that seems a little bit more fun. And I do it for playlists too. So if I put one of your videos into my playlist, I'll make a note guide for your video that goes to my playlist, if that makes sense.
I love
so
that.
Anyways, just trying to throw out ideas for like different ways that you can, do the assessment.
All right.
I agree with that. And my only comment, I think that's a wonderful idea and truly lovely. I really like, so I don't do it quite as structured as you do, but the series of what I'll call post-video activities prior to the formative assessment, I think play perhaps a very similar role in trying to get students to engage with the video content with some prompts and some leading things. I think that's great.